This is Dobble, or in America you might know it as Spot It. Today I'm going to be using it to talk about transferability and whether or not we can get better at speed cubing by practicing other similar tasks. If you're new here, my name's James. I am a movement coach specializing in the brain and nervous system. I've also been a speed cuber for about 15 years now, and my goal with this channel is to help people improve speed cubing by looking outside of the cube and into techniques such as movement, focus, breathing exercises, anything that helps us perform better without focusing on the techniques themselves. And before we get into this, if you can hear a lot of background noise, I am sorry. It is the first day of summer here in Ireland, and it is a tradition for all dads everywhere to take out their largest piece of DIY drilling equipment and test it out to warn off the other dads. I'll do my best to drown out the sound, but unfortunately, I've had a major technical glitch with my laptop, and that means I don't have any other footage filmed to go out today. And what's even more fun, this is my second attempt at this video. I had it filmed and ready to go out, apart from some bits of footage I filmed in Poland. I had made a whole little documentary thing about me practicing Dobble, seeing if I could use it to help me improve my Megaminx times. We'll talk more about that in a bit, but first let's get into transferability in general. So this has always been a really interesting thing to me, because when you look at research into the brain and nervous system, one of the things that people talk about all the time is how specificity is really important. Your brain gets better at the exact thing that you give it to practice, rather than just generally better at all sorts of things. So what that means is, if you want to get better at speed cubing, you need to practice speed cubing. If OLLs are your weakest link, you need to practice OLLs, and you also need to do it within the context of a solve. If you just spam your OLLs, your brain will get better at spamming OLLs. If you want it to be working within the solve, you actually need to have some kind of way to train that within the solve itself. For a long time, there's been loads of, brain training apps and things that say they help prevent cognitive decline, and they will make your reactions better and your focus in all types of situations better. And when it comes down to it, when people do really intensive research on it, they usually find it pretty inconclusive. But then you've got, on the other side of learning, almost every sports coach that I have worked with, and myself included, has come to the realization that when you just drill one specific thing over and over again for a very long time, people tend to stagnate really quick. It actually tends to be not very good for their bones, muscles, joints, or brains to be repeating the exact same thing over and over again in the exact same way for a very long time. And when you start to break it up and vary it with like weird different similar exercises but in a totally different field or different category, you start to notice that those athletes get much better than they would have if they just stuck to a very regimental, disciplined approach. So where exactly does Dobble come into this? I decided before my competition in Poznan, Poland, I wanted to see if I could improve my Megaminx average. Basically, I've been averaging above 2 minutes for a long time. I've kind of got some lucky solves in the last couple of comps I've been to, but I've only ever got one solve under 1 minute 45 seconds, and the cutoff at this competition was 1 minute 45. The big issue that I struggle with when it comes to Megaminx solves is specifically seeing the right pieces at the right time. Now, I've already made a video about peripheral vision training, where I used peripheral vision training to improve times in big cubes, and I probably could have just done that again, but I wanted to experiment with something a little bit different for this one. I decided that rather than using vision training on actual speed cubing, I wanted to look at peripheral vision training using an object find game such as Dobble. So if you've never played this before, basically the idea is you get a load of different cards with about 8 different symbols on it, and on every single card there are 2 objects that are exactly the same. Now I'm going to embarrass myself trying to find it here. On these two cards, they both have an exclamation mark. Leave a comment if you got it quicker than I did. But you're going to work your way down the stack trying to find the matching card each time. Now, to make it a bit harder, Dobble is usually played with 2 players, so if somebody else finds the matching symbol before you, then you have to recalibrate, readjust, and focus all over again to try and find a different matching symbol on the next card. And that's part of what makes it quite a lot of fun. And you probably see that this find the object thing does also require good peripheral vision in order to make it work. If I really focus in on one object, I have to compare each one individually to each object on the next card. If I can just relax my gaze and just see what comes at me, I should be able to match up the 2 pairs at the same time. And that's what I was hoping for, was that practicing Dobble, figuring out how to get better at this card game, would make my peripheral abilities of finding and matching different objects better in the realm of Megaminx. So then we've got to ask ourselves, what would be the potential pros and cons of this approach? So let's start with the obvious con. We've talked about specificity, and it kind of feels like if I want to be getting better at Megaminx, I probably should be focusing on Megaminx. And if I was going to focus on something on the outside, surely I should focus on something where the colors specifically matter rather than something where I'm identifying objects and their names. By working on a card game, I also lose a lot of the other things that are important in speed cubing, such as the dexterity required to move the pieces around. So now let's talk about the pros. Annoyingly, I've hit somewhat of a plateau in Megaminx, so if it were true that just practicing Megaminx specifically is going to make me better, I would expect to see that progress happen steadily over time. Plateaus don't make sense if this specificity rule is true, because at some point you hit a roadblock and the current training that you are doing is not working for whatever reason. That might be because you need to sort out a weak link. You know, maybe my turning's not great, maybe my peripheral vision wasn't good enough to actually match up to the speed that I'm moving. It might even just be that I need a rest. But interestingly, with Dobble, I can actually kill both those birds with one stone. I actually do give myself a rest from speed cubing, and I get to work on what I perceive to be a weak link. One of the other interesting things is, while a lot of the research says specificity is really great, we also know that in order to learn effectively, there are kind of 2 modes or 2 zones that our brain likes to be in. One of them is called the focused zone, or the zone of focused learning. And that is what it sounds like when you're getting into your Megaminx solve and you're just absolutely ignoring everything else in the world outside and figuring out what are the key principles about Megaminx and how it works that will help you complete it faster in the future. But the focus mode only takes you so far. At a certain point, your brain finds it is using too much energy trying to figure out all of these concepts and all of these principles, and then it requires moving into a second zone called the diffuse mode of learning. And this essentially looks like the practice of transferability, but just happening in your brain. So all of the little neurons and nerve pathways that are figuring things out when you're in the focus mode are working really, really hard. And once they get burned out, they need to find a way to enable them to move more efficiently. So what the brain does when you take a rest and you go into this diffuse mode of learning is the brain starts searching around for other examples in your day-to-day life, things where you might have developed reflexes already, where you are actually acting in a similar way to how you are when you're firing these focused neural pathways. So the idea is basically looking for ways that the brain moves where it already knows how to save energy and do it more efficiently, and then connecting those things up so that when you come back to your focus training, it's actually sorted out a lot of the problems that you were having in terms of energy or conflicts between different nerves. So when you're in this diffuse mode, taking a rest is probably the easiest thing you can do. But if you have a weak area that you know could do with some work, it also can be really useful to address this during those diffuse periods. So giving yourself a rest and then working on the weak links and weak areas help the brain kind of connect these two things together by realizing that your focus is on these two things strongly, and it helps kind of bridge the gap. Now, a few other notes if you're interested in this idea of transferability. I have found that the best approach or the best practice is to have as much variation as possible in this transferability training. You don't want to start getting good at another skill. So what I mean by that, if I start playing Dobble every single day, eventually I'm going to get to a point where I start learning skills and techniques that are relevant only to Dobble and that aren't necessarily fitting into this transferability theme. So getting proficient at a skill might not necessarily be the way to go. When I have seen other athletes and other individuals get successful with this, it's always been, you know, you want to train your peripheral vision? Okay, we're going to try 8 different skills that work peripheral vision, and we're going to train them all a little bit, so you never have time to get into it or really discover what it's all about. You only have time to try to figure out the basics, and that's what we're looking for, because your brain is already in that state of trying to figure out what would be useful for the cubing rather than something else. So with that all out of the way, how did it all go? So as I started this challenge, I took an average of 100 from my Megaminx solves, and it was about 2 minutes 3 seconds, I think. That is kind of average for me at home. I did have it a little bit lower towards the end of last year, so I was expecting that it would drop just by getting refamiliarized. However, I was not expecting how significantly things would drop right off the bat. And that kind of idea of not getting proficient at the skill really came into play there, because within the first week, I started getting times in 1 minute 30s every other solve. And that was quite fun, because that is completely unheard of for me. That was probably when I was doing the most Dobble attempts as well. It was taking me about 3 to 5 minutes to get through the whole stack on my own. So I was doing about 3 of them in a day. I think like every 3 Megaminx solves, I would do another stack. I would also have every morning with my partner, we would play the 2-player version, which added the kind of stress component. And yeah, things got really good really quickly, and it was really nice to see. Then, over the weeks, that average kind of dropped back down again. I don't think I ever got my average at home to go under 1 minute 45. I think about 1:48 was the best that I managed. And then as my Megaminx training became kind of more relentless, the Dobble dropped off a little bit. The time started to plateau. So I was still getting in the 1 minute 30 sometimes, but nowhere near as frequently. I would say that the time started to hone in to be a bit more consistent. But then once they hit that consistency, they didn't really progress beyond that. I was pretty pleased with it though. I took it to Poland, and unfortunately, just like in the peripheral video, nerves got the better of me. I found that I could see everything really nicely, but my hands were not under my control. That's something I'm gonna have to deal with for another video. I've already got episodes around how I work on my nerves for multi-blind, which I think I do really well, but I think it takes a little bit of a different approach for speed, and so I'm gonna spend a little time thinking about what I can do for that specific. And really that's about all I got to say for this video. I tried out the approach. I found it to be helpful if you're interested in trying it. Try to guess what your weakest link is in your speed cubing. Is it your turning? Is it your look ahead? Is it actually spotting things? The more precise you can be about it, the more you can start to find peripheral trainings or things that are slightly related in different fields that you can test out. But otherwise, let me know your thoughts. Do you have any complementary trainings that you swear by that help you with your speed cubing or any other discipline for that matter? Let me know in the comments what you think, what else you would like to see me cover. And otherwise, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.